Today, I would like to welcome Dave Woggon, Vice President of Development of Tenet Financial Group. Dave, so happy to have you here today.
Hey, good morning, Mary Jo. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
So we are really going to cover a lot today, Dave. We want to cover the current state of the financing market for franchises. But before we dive into that, Tenet Financial works with franchisees on financing their business. Can you just briefly explain the two programs you work with, the ROBS and the SBA 7A?
I sure will, yes. First off, I just want to thank you. I want to thank Franchise Times for what you guys do. It's so important to educate people because nobody wakes up in the middle of the night with a dream of getting funding for a business. The dream is to own their own business. But in order for that to happen, people have to be comfortable with their funding options. And thanks to people like you, it makes our job easier being able to educate the candidate, because the more educated they are, the more comfortable they are. And bottom line is they're going to realize their dream of business ownership. Mm-hmm. So when we jump into the different types of funding options, there's basically two. There's equity funding and there is debt funding. Now, when it comes to equity funding, probably one of the most popular programs out there is when somebody uses retirement assets to invest in their business without tax or penalty from the IRS. When they do that, they're not borrowing from their retirement. They're not required to pay it back. It's actually debt-free funding. So here's an example. Right now, somebody who's listening may have retirement assets at a brokerage firm where they have gone out and they have invested those dollars, their dollars, into the stock market by buying stock in publicly held companies. The idea is for the companies to use their money to build their business with the hopes of getting a positive return on investment for the companies, for the brokerage firm, and for you. What the candidate here is considering doing when using retirement assets to invest in their business is buy stock, diversify their investment by buying stock in a privately held company, their own company, where then the dollars are now working for them and working for their company. So the whole idea when you talk to CPAs out there is the number one reason why somebody should start a business is to sell a business. Imagine building that business using retirement assets. And let's say 10 years from now, somebody decides to sell their business for $500,000. If the retirement would own, by investing, 95% of the business, at 10 years when they sell the business, the retirement is going to get a check for 95% of the sales price, as in this example, $500,000. So the retirement is going to get a check for $475,000. That check is deposited directly into the 401k. So the other thing about the retirement program is that it allows for cash injection for an SBA loan. Because today in America, we primarily are in a cash poor, retirement rich society where people may not necessarily have the cash injection requirements to meet an SBA loan. So we see a lot of times where people are using the combination of retirement assets with an SBA loan.
Mm-hmm. So what is the availability of financing today for franchisees? What are you seeing now that we're, over a year into COVID, specifically for those franchisees who are just starting to build their business?
So we're seeing more and more people getting into business. That dream of owning their own business, especially maybe because of COVID, where people have worked remotely. We're seeing now that people are required to go back to the office. They don't want to go back to the office. They liked the idea of the flexibility of working from home. So we have seen a huge surge in leads and people wanting to start their own business. And because of that, I believe when it comes to debt funding, the best, even though it's the most challenging, maybe, but the best form of funding when it comes to funding is to utilize an SBA. And the SBA is extremely busy. The banks are busy as ever. And so for that reason, their window boxes have tightened up. They're looking for the best of the best, the A-plus candidate. So there are certain requirements from a generality standpoint when we're talking about SBA loans, because every bank is always different. But what we're seeing in the industry is banks are requiring 20% cash injection. So on a $300,000 loan, the individual is going to have to put in $60,000 of their own money, and they get a loan for $240,000, equaling $300,000. That $60,000 typically has to be spent by the time the loan closes. And a lot of times, people will pay the franchise fee using that cash injection.
Okay.
So if cash injection is a question mark because they don't have the cash, again, that's where the retirement program can work nicely in a combination. Secondly, credit scores need to be 685 or higher to qualify for an SBA loan. Okay, those are the two biggies. Now, the other thing that we're running into more and more, again, because of the window box tightening, banks, they really don't want to lend to franchise opportunities with less than 50 openings. And there are a lot of unbelievable, great emerging franchise opportunities out there that right now we struggle trying to get funding for them because they're in the early stages. The one thing about SBA funding, I always tell people that you have to be patient. You have to be patient, okay? I have told so many candidates, Mary Jo, over the years that, and I've had people come back and tell me, thank you for sharing this with me. Getting an SBA loan, I almost believe that everybody who wants to start a business should actually go through the SBA process, because I always tell people it's going to test you to see how bad you want to be a business owner. There's going to be challenges. There is a lot of paperwork involved. The bank is going to be very diligent in getting that work, okay? If you're somebody who is a thorough individual, this might not be a problem getting an SBA loan. Detailed people do very well getting an SBA loan typically, okay? You have to be detailed. The bank is going to know everything about you. And the one thing I will always tell a prospect going to get an SBA loan is always be honest. Always be honest. Because the bank will find out if you're not. And if you are lying on something, they'll turn you down.
Yeah. What about you were talking about, they have to have a credit score of 685. What about the franchisor? Do they need to be on the SBA franchise directory usually? Very
good point. Yes. The franchisor must be on the SBA directory. And for the most part, we see that franchisors know that and franchisors do that. So they're typically yes, they're on the franchise directory already. But
Mm-hmm.
if they're not, they need to work with the SBA and get on that because, with these opportunities that are 250,000 or higher, it's unless somebody's going to use all, a lot of retirement, all their retirement, an SBA loan is very, very valuable.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do if you're looking at a brand with under 50 units, if you're a franchisee and you want funding?
So I think you still, you get a hold of us, you get a hold of Tenet, and we are going to work with you, and we're going to look for banks. We continually are hunting for banks every day to partner with, because what we do is we actually package the loan for the candidate and then take their information and provide it to the banks. And then we are out looking for banks to partner with and who are interested in that loan. As I said earlier, not every bank is the same. And banks have separate different requirements, even above and beyond what the SBA has. So we have to find the bank that is the right match for the candidate.
And that sometimes is a franchise specific bank where they might be a preferred lender.
Yes. We just had a situation yesterday where a gentleman told us about 4 weeks ago that he was going to go work with his local bank. Well, when he went to his local bank, they said, hey, we're not really big on franchising. We're not real big on wanting to fund franchises, especially ones we don't know. Mm. So he came back to us yesterday and said, hey, you were right. I'm back. Will you help me now?
Yeah.
And because of the relationships that we have with banks, because we've been in the funding industry for as long as we have, we work with banks who are franchise friendly.
Right. And that's the key, is to understand who finances franchises.
Exactly. And we work with nationwide banks, we work with regional banks. And so, they're out there. And we have an awesome SBA team here at Tenet who works directly with the clients. So it's a whole hand-holding process, no matter what program they use. We're there every step of the way with them. And if for some reason SBA funding doesn't work, then there are other forms of funding as well, like in what I call the non-SBA term loans, which is based off of income and credit scores. And somebody must have a minimum of $50,000 in retirement. $50,000 in income and credit scores 685, 700. And somebody who goes through that program, depending on their income, could qualify for up to $175,000.
Mm-hmm. So there's options out there.
There are options, yes. And it's just a matter of, identifying the options with the individual based off of their situation, because everybody is different. And we've even had people where they've maybe had to put business on hold right now because maybe they've had to rebuild their credit scores.
Right.
Maybe they took a hit. We've got to build it. I had one lady, I'll never forget her, and I know she's going to be a successful business owner, because when you talk about being tenacious, this lady, a year later, after building her scores, came back to me and said, Dave, I am ready. I'm ready to start my business. And we were eventually able to fund her. And I'll tell you what, if somebody is willing to make those kind of sacrifices, work that hard, they've got what it takes to be a successful business owner.
Right. Well, Dave, that was some great information today. And for our franchise audience, we really appreciate you being here, and both for your time and your expertise.
Well, thank you, Mary Jo. And if we can be of service to anybody out there, just look us up. We're here to help you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And so for our audience, stay tuned and we'll be right back with our first franchisor presentation.